Hello, honored guests and useless employees. Welcome to Dragonspotting, the podcast where we watch media with dragons in it and then we tell you about him. I'm Heather, pronouns she and they. Welcome to the bathhouse.
I'm Diana, pronouns they, any. Welcome to our humble abode in which we make lovely goods,
Yeah, that
I
that
guess.
lovely good being a podcast.
A podcast for your enjoyment.
A podcast episode where specifically today we are talking about Studio Ghibli's Spirited Away.
And we are so excited to do so.
We are so excited. This, obviously, another animated movie, but this is maybe the first genuinely good film we have talked about on this podcast. Not to
Exciting
say
for us.
that, yeah, not to say, of course, that what we've watched up to this point hasn't been enjoyable in its own ways and hasn't had its own merits, but no, this is a movie made by people who knew how to make a movie, knew exactly what kind of movie they were trying to make, and did a really good job with it.
Yeah. It's also our first foreign language movie, so long as you're
True.
watching the original Japanese and not the English dub, which we did both for this
Yeah.
podcast episode.
Yeah, to get out ahead of it, we did watch both versions. We are going to be talking about, if you want to say, well, which version are we going to be talking about? We're going to be talking about kind of both, but with more of a focus on the dub because that is what we were most familiar with, it being
Yeah.
in our language that we know, our first language. You get the concept. We speak English, not Japanese.
We speak English, and also both of us, up until this point, had only experienced the English dub. So it's the one we are more familiar with as well from that angle.
Yes, so with that, a bit of context, as always. I
I'm so
did see
excited
this
for this.
movie very young as a child, and I remember it did scare me to the point that I don't think I ever truly sat down and finished watching it through until I was maybe a teenager.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so I remember up to the radish spirit
Oh, okay.
as a child, but I'm not entirely sure. Like after that it's kind of muddled. It's been a
Mhm.
long time.
Yeah. I, for my part, did not see it when I was a kid. I think the only Ghibli movie I saw as a child was fucking Ponyo, which is very funny considering how I understand that movie to be a bit maligned by a lot of people, but that's beside the point.
I've not
I
heard
s-
of about any of that, so I couldn't say.
the first time that I saw this movie was a couple of years ago as a full-on adult. I was lent it by two different coworkers from when I worked in a restaurant. The first person who lent it to me lost the disc that had the movie, and
Right.
he gave me the two disc special edition, but only with the second disc. And when I told him about it, he was like, "Oh, that's okay. You can just keep it." And I was like, "Cool." And then later, another coworker who I became better friends with lent me several Studio Ghibli movies to consume, and I
Awesome.
I enjoyed Spirited Away a lot then, and I enjoyed it now during our rewatches.
Yeah, because there's a lot to enjoy about this movie,
Yes,
and
lot
we're
to
going to
enjoy
talk
about this
about all that. Before we do, though, as is
movie.
tradition, we're going to talk a bit about the production of this movie. And although the result is very competent, very professional, and very enjoyable, don't forget that this is an animated film. The
why
production is not pretty in some places.
why would an animated movie ever be normal behind the scenes?
Why would it?
Why
Why would
why
it?
would an animal movie ever be normal behind the scenes?
Yeah, I don't know. Wishful thinking, maybe?
We certainly wish it to be so.
Uh,
For all you lovely animators out there, that you do not have to deal with terrible, terrible bureaucracy when trying to make your really cool thing. That is my wish for you.
well, we're gonna get started. first with some preliminary information taken from Wikipedia, specifically from a source they cite from Nausicaa.net, which is an interview directly with director Hayao Miyazaki. If you're not familiar with Studio Ghibli, he is basically the man behind every production.
He is the Walt Disney behind Studio Ghibli, but
Yeah,
like
that's a good way
still
of
alive,
putting
I
it.
think.
Yeah, still alive. Last I
Okay, that's what I
checked.
thought. Yeah.
But yeah, this interview comes from Nausicaa.net. I'm going to use this to lay some groundwork, but then we're going to transition into a kind of retelling, a bridge of a television documentary that aired in Japan about the production, which covers a lot of what I'm going to be talking about. It's available on the special edition DVD disc. I don't know where you would find it otherwise. Sorry.
That's all I need to know.
Yeah. Right before this film went into production, the last film that Studio Ghibli had done was Princess Mononoke.
Okay.
So, before Princess Mononoke even came out, Hayao Miyazaki was looking to do a proposal on a different film. And ultimately, Spirited Away is the culmination of two rejected proposals, in which the third proposal was what eventually became Spirited Away.
Okay.
The first one was based on a children's book called Kiri no Mukono Fushigina Machi, or The Mysterious Town Past the Mist.
Okay.
One Studio Ghibli staff member liked it as a girl, and Miyazaki in this interview said he was mortified that he didn't get it. So he decided to do a proposal for a movie based on the book, but it was rejected outright. So I guess he really didn't get it.
It was confusing for him.
Yeah. And that was before Mononoke. The next proposal he did with this idea was called Rin and the Chimney Painter, which featured a livelier, older girl protagonist and was a more contemporary story. And he says it ended up being a story about a scary old woman sitting on the bandai of a bathhouse. And a bandai is like it's like a chair that the big boss sits in, essentially. Gotcha. And if anyone is already familiar with Spirited Away, that's going to sound familiar because he kind of took the ideas from the previous proposals and kind of bundled them up into this third final proposal, which was Spirited Away.
Mm-hmm.
All of the stories he was working on up to that point were stories featuring a bathhouse, and he talks about how when he was younger, there was a bathhouse with this kind of little door in the side of it, and he always wondered where that little door went. And that's kind of the idea that took root and blossomed into the entire adventure of Spirited Away. The answer to that question of what's behind this little door.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Spirited Away also takes a lot of elements of Shinto Buddhism, a lot of inspiration from there. Miyazaki says that he borrowed imagery from different like rituals and shrines because, and this is a paraphrase of a direct quote, Japanese gods have no actual forms. They are the rocks, the trees, the pillars, etc. He also drew a lot of inspiration of a theme park that he went to as a child. Yeah. Specifically, it was the outdoor architecture museum, which featured a lot of Edo period architecture kind of reconstructed in this outdoor venue that you could walk around. It was essentially a little town.
Okay.
And he said he was very nostalgic for that kind of older Western style architecture. And he talks about how he kind of made this film to invoke nostalgia. He talks about how it's a little strange, in my opinion. I maybe the like interviews just not translated well enough, or I just don't get what he's getting at here, but he talks about how like people used to live modesty, how people kind of think that the big problems we're facing now are the first time anyone's faced these problems, but he says, I think it's just because we're not used to them because of the recession.
Okay.
I wanted to note this because, like, this kind of is a undercurrent in a lot of Miyazaki's works. Like that kind of reaction to like recession and that feeling of like a lot of people say, "Oh, Miyazaki films are so cozy and all that," even though that's not really what he's going for. I think people are picking up on that kind of nostalgic angle of understanding that these problems are not like the be all end all and kind of looking back at the past for that reason. I think I'm going to cut this entire segment, honestly. I think I'm muddling this, but
I actually disagree, and I wanted to
okay.
state my own response if that's okay.
Sure.
Yeah, because I agree. I've never really understood people saying that Miyazaki films are cozy. I think that is I'm going to sit here and do the thing where I act as if I am the only person who truly understands any piece of art ever.
You are the knower. You are
Ever.
the understander.
But well and truly, I think that calling a Miyazaki movie cozy misunderstands its point. It feels cozy because it is evocative of childhood.
Yeah.
And if you have a positive view on childhood, seeing a movie in which childhood is depicted is going to make you feel nostalgic in like a good way. Whereas I didn't necessarily have an unhappy childhood, but I do remember being a deeply unhappy child for many reasons. A lot of them attached to like undiagnosed mental health stuff. And watching Miyazaki movies also elicit that feeling of being a childhood, especially in terms of like maladaptive fantasy. That's what a lot of this feels like to me, is you are a child who is in a world that you don't fully understand. But because you are a child, it feels a little bit whimsical, but also it is by nature quite dark. And that's what Miyazaki always feels like to me. It's evoking that specific feeling. And I don't think seeing them as cozy is a bad thing.
No.
But it does make me kind of side-eye people sometimes where I'm like, oh, okay, so you're one of those motherfuckers who, like, were not exposed to bad things as a kid and or did not have any kind of understanding that just because things were going well for you does not mean it was like that for the rest of the world. Which, not to get too personal, but no, I understood that shit was bad when I was a kid. Like, 100% absolutely, you know?
Yeah.
And that's how Miyazaki movies feel to me.
Yeah. So this is I'm going to talk about this more, but
okay.
Something I did want to say before I get into the documentary, because this thought occurred to me and I thought it was very funny. So Miyazaki is taking a lot of inspiration from, things he experienced growing up and as a child and combining them into this singular, like, fantastical setting. So in a way, you could argue that this production is the Star Wars of fantasy. Because much like George Lucas, Miyazaki is taking nostalgic experiences he had as a child and weaving them together into a fantastic adventure.
Oh my god, our letterbox bit is gonna finally make sense again, but like in the worst way, because we're gonna comment it on fucking Spirited Away.
Yeah, I'm sure people won't be mad at us for making this joke.
Yeah, surely not.
Mm-hmm.
They can all... You'll live.
Yeah.
You're fine.
So, yeah.
Follow us on Letterboxd.
Yeah. So, the Nippon TV special, the documentary that a lot of the production information I'm going to be drawing from, is 4 years after the production of Princess Mononoke.
Okay.
So, this documentary kind of opens with, context about the development of this story. And some of what I already mentioned is in there, but the inspiration for the main character, Chihiro, was based on Miyazaki's friend's daughter, both of them being 10-year-old girls. And Miyazaki's desire to make this movie was basically, I will make a movie for her. He was inspired from the time he spent with his friends at their summer cabin, and he noticed a lot of, like, the manga that was there at the cabin for little girls was, like, romance manga, or like manga of like about liking boys and crushes and whatnot. And he looked at this and shook his head and was like, we're failing the youth. This is not, I want to make a protagonist that this little girl can look up to. This manga is not what's in her heart. She yearns for adventure.
Yeah, we are failing little girls specifically.
Yeah. He specifically thought, will she be able to keep her spirit in our world as she grows up?
Oh.
Yeah. And something this kind of goes into in the documentary is a little bit of an aside about how most animated characters in Miyazaki's work are modeled off of real people that he knows.
Mm-hmm.
You can kind of see them throughout all of his work. Chihiro's dad, for example, is modeled off of the actual little girl's father. Chihiro is modeled after the little girl. Even his behavior, like, for example, Miyazaki notes that his friend would get lost a lot when driving, and the way he eats in the film is modeled off of how his friend actually looks while eating.
Oh my, imagine being that friend and your buddy's like, "Hey, I made a character in my movie inspired by you when you watched Spirit Away," and you're that fucking guy and you're like, "Is this how you see me?"
Well, he also looks like the friend as well.
That's a little less mean.
Yeah.
Cuz you just look like that.
Yeah. Well, I wonder how the mother felt about watching it, because the mother character was not based off of her. She was based off of a Studio Ghibli staff member.
You know what? I honestly wouldn't want to be. If someone pointed to that woman and was like, "I based her off of you," first I would say, okay, grossly inaccurate. I don't act like that. But also, too, oh, I'm so hurt. I'm so hurt that you see me that way.
Well, the thing Miyazaki specifically says is like, oh, the way she rests on her elbows and the way she moves.
Okay.
And her manner of, like, speaking.
Okay, well, that's
it's kind of a bunch of different elements kind of all coming together.
Sure.
He pulls from a lot of places. He wanted the world of Spirited Away to be that of old Japan, and he talks about the outdoor building museum, obviously, and he mentions specifically the feeling of going there at twilight and the kind of melancholic feeling that would come with it.
Yeah.
And he kind of took all this, rolled it together, and came up with the, like, single sentence pitch of what Spirited Away is. Modern girl is lost in an old world, has an adventure, and she enjoys it.
Hell yeah.
Yep.
That is what this movie is.
That is what this movie is, and now they have to make it. So we take a trip down to the animation department. The documentary makes a point that all of the animation in this movie is hand-drawn, while acknowledging digital animation as well. They're like, we don't use digital animation, but the process is much the same. And we see kind of the entire studio, the camera pans around, and we see all the drawings and the desks of the animators, and them all, like, manually flipping through these animation drawings. It's a bit of a mess, honestly. Like, you can see, like, these papers pinned up to all these, like, wooden desks, stacks and stacks of it. It's kind of like a controlled chaos environment, it looks like. We'll see if that stays the same, though, throughout production.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I really like this documentary, and I'm kind of going through it very specifically because I think it's a really good insight into how animation works, specifically how animation works in the Japanese animation industry. It's really fascinating. If you can track down this documentary, I strongly recommend you watch it for yourself, just because if you think animation is cool, you will like it. We have a storyboard meeting, and this kind of goes back into, again, of how animation and the animation process at Studio Ghibli is, like, done, where they're all looking over their storyboards together, and this is specifically describing a scene where one character, Haku, falls into a location, the boiler room. We're going to get context for this later when we do the summary. But Miyazaki talks about how when he falls, he sticks to the wall like a gecko. He falls like a rat snake. And he has to ask around the table all these animators who, most of them are much younger than he is. And he says, like, oh, you haven't seen that? Have you not seen that before? I guess in Tokyo you wouldn't have seen that. Well, it goes like this. And he does a bunch of, like, hand gestures and makes noises. And he's doing, like, the sound effects as he's describing everything. And I just felt a very strong kinship with this man in that moment. Yeah. He
We've all done that.
Yeah, he talks about, well, oh, he's gonna thrash around the scene. If you don't know how this is supposed to look, go to an eel restaurant and order the eel where they kill it in front of you, and you'll see what I mean. Have you not done that before? Have you not done that? Like, a lot of this is Miyazaki kind of presuming people have had these life experiences that they haven't yet, and him getting, like, very flustered as he tries to bridge that gap. He also mentions, like, there is a scene we're going to talk about later on where someone tries to feed this character, like, a thing. And as they're doing it, they have to, like, pull and hold their mouth open. And Miyazaki specifically says, like, he asks around and says, has anybody ever owned a dog and had to try to get them to eat something? And only one animator had a dog. But yeah, I think that moment made me light up because we had said when we were watching the animation, oh, this looks exactly like when you're trying to feed a dog something.
I was about to say, no, I've done that. I have absolutely stuck my hand just fully in my dog's mouth trying to get him to swallow a tablet because he ate the cheese and not the pill.
Yeah. And because the animators didn't have this experience, do you know what they did? After the meeting, when, by the way, I want to make note of this, the documentary says, oh, after the meeting, and it is decidedly nighttime now. Like, the meeting was, like, in the morning, and it is now nighttime, and I just thought, bit of a foreshadowing of how we're gonna see this production ends up going. They all visit the animal hospital together and just take a video of a veterinarian showing them how you have to feed a dog something. And then they go back to work and they're just watching this video over and over to make sure that they have the reference correct.
Yeah.
Miyazaki is incredibly hands-on throughout the production. He keeps his desk next to the animators and personally checks the animation. His desk is incredibly messy.
Oh, I'm sure.
Okay, I did write down a year. This is in September 1999. In an interview, he notes, I can't work like I used to, but if the staff lets me participate in the process differently as director, I have some movies I would still like to make. Because obviously, Miyazaki is pretty old at this point. He turned 60 in 2001.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so, and this is after Princess Mononoke. He turned 60, and during Princess Mononoke and all films prior, he personally handled all changes to the original drawings. Those original drawings being, I don't know if they are equivalent to keyframes, but they are basically all of the drawings you do before you do all the in-between animation and stuff like that. Those are the original drawings.
Yeah, so I think those are the keyframes.
Yeah. So, but during Spirited Away's production, he ends up, delegating that work to other staff. The staff the documentary mentions is Masashi Ando, who is a 31-year-old animation director. He had worked at Studio Ghibli for 10 years as a chief animation director since Only Yesterday, which is another Ghibli film. Yeah, Miyazaki is basically working with him as an equal, the documentary notes, and they are kind of doing the final checks together. He is asking him, like, oh, what is your opinion on this? So, he's having to delegate a bit more on this movie. It's not just, like, his final say on everything.
Interesting.
All right. So, at this point, we're about a year into production. 6 months from release.
Oh.
Only half of the original pictures are done. Oh, no.
Huh? Oh, no.
Only half of the original pictures are finished, and we are 6 months from release. According to the documentary, this is, quote, an unusual situation. In order to make their deadline, they had to triple the work's output. While also considering color and sound.
Oh my god.
There is a really striking shot in the documentary here of an animation drawing half finished and like kind of erased, discarded and pinned under an office chair's wheel. Where while someone is sitting in it working on another drawing.
Haunting.
Yeah, haunting. That's like, oh my god. So Yeah. They ended up doubling the illustrators from 20 to 40 and sped up production 4 times.
No. No.
So by the end of production, which we're not getting there yet, but I want to know, by the end of production, they had a weekly goal of 28 cuts. They show shots of like their production schedule. At the very end, the last production schedule that they show is 28 cuts. This week's result, 16 cuts. Last week's, 21 cuts. 12 cuts remaining. 1,403 cuts complete. Yep. By April, 3 months to open, 101 cuts remained.
Okay.
Yeah. The final editing is going to take place on May 11th, 12th, and 13th. Miyazaki notes that this gives them 3 days to count backwards. They need to know the final length so music can be recorded. It has to be done by then.
Oh.
We see a clock showing 12:15 a.m. with all animators still at their desks.
No.
To the credit of Miyazaki, the documentary notes, Miyazaki never went home before midnight. He would leave as late as 2 a.m. and be back to work at 11.
Dog.
Yeah. He makes a suggestion for outsourcing or not him, someone in one of the meetings makes a suggestion for outsourcing animation to Korea because there are just not enough people domestically.
Yeah. God.
Yep. Yeah, but I want to give credit now here to Endo, who stays even longer.
Jesus.
He worked until 7 a.m. on the night the documentary is noting. Jesus Christ. And
oh my God.
I'm going to make a note here because I need to make a comment on this because this is also kind of a problem with obviously not just with the Japanese animation industry, but, the animation industry as a whole is brutal. It is a mill. But from what I have heard, the Japanese animation industry is, this is not that unusual of a situation, unfortunately. Yeah, and the documentary is kind of grossly romantic about this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I was about to say, this is, the fact that this is on the DVD, they just kind of...
Yeah.
Versus... we go back to Pete's Dragon, where I kind of had to drag that information out of the mud, basically.
Yeah.
And Disney was not talking about that. That was very much something that, you find in articles of people lodging complaints against the company, and, Don Bluth saying, yeah, my animators were kept there until 9 and 10 o'clock at night, and we didn't get paid, and we said, fuck you.
Yeah.
Very different culture. As far as that's concerned. And when I say that, I don't necessarily mean between American
obviously.
and Japanese culture. It's this happens in the US too. It's just, we're just quieter about it.
Absolutely. Yeah. We get a shot of people asleep at their desks, and in my notes I note that they look hollow.
My God.
We do have a really nice human moment here, though, where members of staff take turns cooking meals after 11.
Oh.
And it's very sweet. They say, well, this is just something that arose out of no one asked anybody to do it. It's just something we all started doing. And I want to give a shout out to animation director Kitaro Kosaka, who makes spaghetti, and the documentary notes his Italian cooking is very professional.
Oh yeah. Again, beautiful human thing. Fucking haunting that they had to resort to that.
Yeah, it's fucked that this is what the situation was for a very long time.
Yeah.
We arrive at May 11th. Miraculously, all 1,415 cuts have been completed. However, we can't take a break because that's just the original drawings completed. The animation process needs to begin.
They have to do all the in-betweens.
Yep. It's a July release. They can't reschedule. So, yeah, they note that if they hadn't doubled or tripled their efforts, they wouldn't have been able to release until December. Like, that is how
And
much work they condensed.
Jesus fucking.
Yeah.
Like, I get it. I get it that things exist on a timeline because money gets spent and you have to do it. The world
Yeah.
should not be run this way.
It
Art should
shouldn't.
not be made this way.
Yeah, and I think this is something that, like, is really needs to be emphasized of, we have had a lot of, like, messy productions on this show already.
Yeah,
Like,
5 episodes
already.
in. Yeah.
And usually, like, you can see it in the end product of, oh, well, yeah, clearly this was, like, mismanaged or a messy production and all that. This happens even in the best of movies. Like, this happens even
Yes.
when you can't see it reflected in the final product.
Yeah.
Like, blood goes into these. And I think that's something that, like, you need to fucking remember when you are looking at this art, and just, I don't know how anyone can look at this and not be in awe of the effort that it takes to make these. And it's not even, like, necessary effort sometimes. Like,
Yeah.
it being made in this short of an amount of time is, like, it's tragic that these people have to be put through this kind of a ringer to make art like this, because it's not necessary. It's the result of, like, production schedules and, like, bureaucracy and demands and all that. And I don't know. To harken back to what I said with Quest for Camelot, it's a miracle anything exists at all. And I just appreciate that miracle continues to happen in spite of everything that some people have to go through for it. Not even are made to go through for it.
Yeah. It truly is that meme, like, the perfect production doesn't exist, but, like, it's a full stop. You don't continue beyond that.
Yeah. Well, it's Miyazaki's turn to cook now. There's a really funny bit in the documentary where he is filling a pot with so many instant noodles. He puts, like, 10 bricks in there. The pot is almost overflowing. But yeah, he's making ramen for the staff. The documentary says, "This is the power of Ghibli staff, and I suck air in through my teeth." Yeah, but we get a shot of them. All of them are so exhausted. Ando looks, like, so tired. But, they start laughing and joking together. And there's, like, a sense of solidarity among the staff that, like, I think is a very, again, nice human moment in the midst of this just machine grinding these people into a paste. It is so dark outside. But fortunately, the animation is also completed on time. And we move on to post-production.
Great.
Yeah. The post-production is done in an unorthodox converted screening room in their second studio. So instead of, like, a recording booth, it's like an open theater. And this is something I thought was really interesting. The dialogue is recorded entirely in post. It's synchronously recorded with the animation.
Okay.
And that's interesting to me because when we talked about Quest for Camelot, we kind of took this for granted. Is obviously the animation is done after the dialogue and writing is recorded and all that.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not what they do here. They get the actors to basically look at the screen and read their lines synced up to the animation.
That's interesting and also makes sense.
Yeah, I will say they are very, very rigorous with their, like, line reading, making sure it's correct and all that. We see the voice actress for Chihiro, Rumi Hiragi. She's very nervous with the production. There is specifically one line very early on in the movie that she can't get, and the documentary is just showing her accidentally messing up the intonation on this line over and over, and she's so flustered, but eventually she gets it and everyone is so proud of her.
Yeah. Girl, it's all good.
Yeah. We also get to see how the sound recording is done, where they send these guys out to real actual locations like bathhouses, waterfalls, and they kind of just sit in there with
That
a
makes sense.
microphone to record
Yep.
these ambient sounds and all that. But we also see when they need specific kinds of like curated sounds, they call on a guy called Mr. Noguchi. Mr. Noguchi. And the documentary notes says his professional elements are on display here as he kind of like jumps in dirt and like cement and is like doing these cool fun motions that get these sound effects made.
He
In a
pulls out a balloon?
studio. Yeah, there's it's a studio just full of like Foley props.
Yes. I love Foley artists.
Yeah. So
It's
shout
so
out to
fun.
him. And
Thank you, Mr.
also,
Noguchi.
obviously sound and voices are not the only audio in this movie because there is a fucking really good soundtrack to this movie.
Yes. Holy
and that
shit.
is accredited to composer Joe Hisaishi, who
Yes.
was the composer for like all of Miyazaki's films, including Nausicaa Valley of the Winds, which is the one they specifically like credit him with.
Okay.
He records in a concert hall with 60 microphones.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, because he is very, very particular about the sound of this recording. Yep.
Rules.
Yeah, but they managed to rap on audio as well, and they present all the kids with like flowers. It's very sweet.
Oh.
And the last song that kind of comes in here is the theme song of the movie, which is the song that plays over the credits. Always
Yes.
With Me by singer and composer Yumi Kimura and the lyricist Wakako Kaku. So, funny story about this singer and how Miyazaki came upon her, because apparently she was not very well known.
Mhm.
And when like Miyazaki was asked why did you use this lesser known singer, he remarks that the well-known professionals are losing their power. And he ended up hearing about her because she sent him her song to use out of a desire to be part of a Ghibli production after seeing Princess Mononoke. She's
That's
like,
so cool.
I sent it to him with a letter saying, "Hey, I think you'd like to listen to this." And
Smiley face.
originally he planned for her song to be in Lin the Chimney Sweep. It didn't work out. But then he later recalled it when thinking about like the music for Spirited Away. And he was very inspired at this song that he said was about the wonder of living and the wonder of dying.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that is, and after the audio is wrapped, that's kind of where the documentary ends, because that's the last bit of production they had to do before release.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that is kind of the entire Japanese side of the production for this movie from start to end. Not as much of a mismanaged disaster as our last animated film, but I think, again, it goes to show that even when it is, like, run very efficiently, even when the, like, people in charge are actively on the ground working with, you know, their animators and all that, when they have, even when they have a perfect understanding of the animation industry, it's still a brutally difficult thing to do.
Also, even when it's a labor of love, because you talked about how
a labor of love.
You talked about how Quest for Camelot, like nobody enjoyed working on that movie. Versus this, it seemed like everybody enjoyed working on it. Also, by the end of it, they looked like corpses.
Yeah.
It goes both ways.
It goes both ways. But I did note that was the end of the Japanese side of production. Because as we noted, Diana, as we noted, we watched this in the dub.
Foreshadowing is a literary device.
Well, actually, so what I have about the dub is also from an on-disc special, which is a documentary called Behind the Voices. I say documentary, it's like a 6-minute segment.
It's like a featurette.
Yeah, it's a little featurette. But we see this is like kind of an insight into the dub process, which was handled by Disney. Yep.
Sort of, kind of, not really our second Disney movie.
Kind of. Like, a lot of Disney staff are on this.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, Kirk Wise is the director for English translation. Jason Marsden is the voice of Haku. And Devay Chase is the voice of Chihiro. Jason Marsden, you probably know from a lot of cartoons. He has a very distinctive voice. He did Kid Flash in Young Justice. I'm pretty sure he did Chester in Fairly Odd Parents. Couple things for Nickelodeon, but he's been around. He's a prominent voice actor. And DeVay Chase, the voice of Chihiro, is the voice of Lilo from Lilo and Stitch.
Oh shit. Okay.
Yeah. So, yeah, actual child that they got to voice this child, which honestly feels unusual for like Western animation. I feel like they do it more now, but I feel like back when this was being made in like late 90s, early 2000s, I feel like that, I could just be wrong. This could just be like recency bias, but I feel like that wasn't really as big a thing.
I mean, I can talk about something that we discussed about what I remember growing up with Ghibli movies being translated by and then actively promoted by Disney, which is they seem to use them a little bit as vehicles for rising child stars. Like, specifically with Ponyo, I so distinctly remember being flooded constantly on the Disney Channel by Ponyo things where they were promoting the fact that they had Noah Cyrus, younger sister of Miley Cyrus, and Frankie Jonas, younger brother of the Jonas Brothers, voicing the main characters of that movie. Both of them at the time being like young kids. Like, not to give myself away, but like I'm the same age as Noah Cyrus and Frankie Jonas, maybe a little bit older than them.
Whoa.
Yeah, no, it's kind of crazy. But I wonder because Lilo and Stitch was either a 90s or early 2000s movie, and I wonder if this was maybe even dubbed concurrently. Like, I don't remember when Lilo and Stitch came out, but it might have been that they liked her so much for one of the movies that they just slotted her in for the other one, and maybe we're going to try to, like, boost her career through that.
Lilo and Stitch came out in 2002.
Okay, so a year after this, right?
Yeah, a year after this, so I think the dub was probably done a bit after this.
They might have even been recorded concurrently.
I don't know. Unfortunately, that's not something I checked. I wish I did, but
I guess
I was more, for this segment, I was more interested in the fact that this Behind the Voices documentary was so different in how they discussed voice acting and the process of it compared to the one that was on the Quest for Camelot special features.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because Jason Marsden, unlike most of the people working on Quest for Camelot, is a professional voice actor who knows what he's doing.
This guy... Yeah.
Instead of talking about how different it is to act with just your voice as opposed to acting with all of your body, he specifically talks about how when you're dubbing a film, everything is done through ADR, automatic dialogue replacement. So there's differences in timing, which influence my choices as a voice actor. Normally, when I'm voice acting, I have the opportunity to kind of embellish a line or say things in a way where it comes out of my mouth more naturally. I can't do that because I'm sitting directly in front of this television screen that has the mouth flaps like going that I need to match up because obviously they're not going to change it for me.
Yeah. Yeah, that is always something also that I notice with English dubs. And the reason why I personally tend to stay away from them is that like my brain just specifically picks up on the kind of roboticness that has to be done when fitting English sentences into Japanese-sized holes, because English and Japanese are very different languages.
Very different. But I will say, to this movie's credit, and I'm going to say to the credit of the dubbing industry today, they've gotten very good at it.
Yes, this movie...
It is a lot better now than it was, like, 10 years ago.
This movie is very, very tolerable to me. Like, there's a lot of anime, especially from the 90s and 2000s, that I find unwatchable in English. This is not one of them. I enjoy most of the voice acting and most of the vocal performances, and the ones I don't, it's not their fault. It is the fault of, you have been given an incredibly awkward task. And sometimes it is just not possible to pull it off. And that's okay.
Yeah. So
I want to make myself clear because I don't want to be like a snob about it. I also want to give credit to the voice actors. They're
yeah.
doing hard work.
And to continue giving credit to the voice actors, we have got Suzanne Plachette, who is the voice of Yubaba and Zeniba. And she makes an interesting comment here where she made choices for the voices she was going to do before hearing how the Japanese voice acting sounded, which I think is interesting. Not like as one way or the other of like, oh, was it the right choice? Was it the wrong choice? I think it's interesting of like, yeah, you want your performance to be, natural to you. Because if you're trying to imitate someone else's voice acting, I think that's going to add a layer of like inauthenticity to it. But that's just my opinion. But it's interesting because she makes the opposite choice of the Japanese voice actress for Yubaba and Zeniba, where she notes that in the original Japanese, Zeniba has a heavier voice and Yubaba has a lighter voice, where in the English dub, Suzanne Plachette gave Yubaba the heavier voice and Zeniba the lighter voice.
Yeah, we talked about this difference in our second watch through when we took notes on how it might be related to cultural difference of in the Japanese, Yubaba has to put on this higher, kind of more girlish voice as part of like a customer service act, whereas Zeniba, who is just off on her own, is allowing her cadence to be more natural and therefore kind of lets it dip lower. Whereas in the English, it's Yubaba is kind of this Yubaba is this shrewish, conniving businesswoman, and so she has this lower register because she's more, in quotes, mannish that way.
She's like the chain-smoking businesswoman.
Yeah, whereas Aniba is like the grandmotherly type, so she has this warbling higher voice. I think both choices are valid and interesting in their own right.
Yeah. And this is why I'm glad we watched both. Because these differences are fascinating. And I think people do themselves a disservice by limiting themselves entirely to either dub or sub, regardless of the production.
Yeah. Sometimes I wish I was... That's a lie. I don't sometimes wish that I was a polyglot. I wish constantly all the time that I was a polyglot who knew every single language in existence.
Yeah.
Because... translation is so fascinating.
It is.
And if I had one superpower, it would just be I know all languages. I know them all. I know them all, and I can see the difference. I'm tangenting again. We gotta get going.
You're getting tangential with it. You're only intersecting with one part of the sphere.
My lines are not running perpendicular.
Yeah. Well, kind of to power through these next couple of just little interesting bits I saw in the documentary. We get Susan Egan, the voice of Lynn. She voiced Meg from Hercules, and she notes when voicing Meg from Hercules, there wasn't a final product. She got to see sketches of characters, maybe some descriptions of scenes, obviously, but nothing was really animated. But here, she says that she allowed her performance to be inspired by the final animation. We get a bit of Lauren Holly, who was the voice actress for Chihiro's mom, and there's a very fun bit where, while voice acting the scene where the parents are eating, she is literally in the booth eating an apple, so that she can naturally sound like she's chewing something, because she is.
That rules. I love it.
Yeah. We get to see the voice cameo, the classic Disney voice cameo of John Ratzenberger, who is in this dub voicing the manager from the bathhouse who sings the kiss up brown nosing song. We'll get to that scene and I'll point it out again. But if you're not familiar with the name John Ratzenberger, you've definitely heard his voice if you have seen literally any Pixar movie, because he's in all of them. He's that very distinctive voice. He's the pig from Toy Story. He's the truck from Cars. He's that guy. The flea from Bug's Life. He's in all of them. Every Pixar movie. If you've seen it, you know his voice.
I love it. Love shit
Yep.
like that.
Yeah, the directors and people in charge of the English translation say, "Oh, he's Disney's good luck charm."
That's so fun.
Yeah. We get another good luck charm though that they note. David Ogen Steers, who voices Kamaji in the English dub. He was the voice of characters like Cogsworth in other Disney films.
Okay.
Yeah, he flubs up the timing on one of his lines. It's very cute. They're timing their voice acting obviously with the images on screen, but they also have this machine that like beeps 3 times in anticipation for them to start speaking. It's yeah, it's very like got I really respect these dub actors because like this is a difficult thing to do.
Yes. Yeah.
We see Cindy and Donald Hewitt, who were the writers for the English translation, or at least some
Hmm.
of the writers involved. And them and Kirk Wise talk about, what goes into protecting the intent of the original, Studio Ghibli movie.
Hmm.
And this kind of comes into a conversation that I think is important about localization versus translation.
Yep.
And I don't want to be stepping into a minefield here, but I kind of am because unfortunately, people are incredibly weird about this.
Yeah.
They talk about their goal in this translation of the production is they want to include and weave into the movie seamlessly lines about like what's happening to provide important cultural context to stuff that's going on and make it sound like they are speaking in natural American English because that's what
Okay.
their job is. But they have to
Hmm.
do that while protecting the intent of the original movie. And there are a handful of times we caught when watching the sub and the dub that there are a couple key differences in how some moments are translated and how some characters kind of behave and what they say. And a lot of people will look at situations like this and see it as like the most grievous sin.
Yeah.
They will look at it and they will think that this is a great evil, that dubbing and localization specifically is awful conceptually, like it shouldn't be done at all. And I don't understand that. I can't wrap my head around it of like obvious I think when most people think of like localization as a concept when they get really mad about it, they think about stuff that happened with like 4 Kids anime dub. I don't know if you're
Yeah.
familiar with 4 Kids, Diana, but it's
I know enough
where
about it.
yeah,
Yeah.
if you've ever seen like the meme of Brock from Pokemon holding onigiri and saying, "Oh, I love my delicious jelly donut," that was like the kind of shit they were doing. Like on that I can say, yeah, that's unnecessary. Come on. But no, there is like there is necessary change you have to make in order to, accommodate certain things. Like you talked about, lip flaps. They don't have an infinite amount of time to translate these lines perfectly because Japanese and English are incredibly different languages. You can express a very complex idea in Japanese in very few words, or sometimes it takes a lot of words to communicate something that would be very short in English.
Yep.
But there's a lot of like cultural context and a lot of like things with tone in Japanese. Japanese has this incredible, like very complicated social aspect to it where the
Yep.
words you choose to use and like how you say things and what you do, there is so much of that expresses, relationships and has very important connotations that you would miss if you directly translated them. And I'm not
Yes.
trying to be one of those people who's like, well, you can't translate this as friend. You have to say nakama because nakama is a much deeper, truer thing than Western friendship is. No, that don't be stupid. But like so much work goes into this. So much
Yeah.
work by like very intelligent and caring people go into
Yes.
things like this. And I can't I cannot get behind any idea that they should be discredited entirely simply based on some preconceived notion about, cultural differences or the importance of literal translation.
Yeah. I I definitely enjoy more literal translations in certain contexts, and I also come from a school of thought having done some studies of literature from colonized cultures in college, wherein when they wrote in English, they were reclaiming English as a language of their culture without then giving up other aspects of their culture and therefore not explaining themselves to an audience who understands English but is not of the culture, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
They're a colonized people who are not writing for their colonizers. So there is definitely something to be said about translated works that then do not dumb themselves down for an audience. But that's also
Yeah.
not what we're talking about here.
Yeah. I wouldn't say
And
anything has been dumbed down in the dub of this
no,
movie.
no. And I think what I'm getting at here is there is an artistry that comes with translation and localization, and you have to keep that in mind. You can't have
Yeah.
a one size fits all kind of thing for situations like these. And also this is why you don't limit yourself to just one version of a thing. For movies, you have, excuse me, for movies, you can watch both the translation and the original language sub. And for other works, you might not be able to, depending on what it is, read it in both languages. But if it is an older work, specifically I'm thinking of War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy, there are multiple translations of that work now, and some of them are considered better than others. And sometimes there are translations that people say you should actually read both of these because they are both offering something different as far as what they are doing for the original work if you can't read it in that original language. And I don't know. I think that's important to keep in mind when consuming any and all art is just keep your mind open to different interpretations of the thing. And also approach each interpretation with a sense of nuance that maybe you won't get everything, but you're going to be gaining something no matter what.
Absolutely. And as just one last statement on this, specifically about dub versus sub in terms, like in the context specifically of anime, I'm grateful that I do know at least a little bit of Japanese that I can recognize when things are off in some situations. There are
Mm-hmm.
times where the subtitles are not translating something like directly
Yeah.
because hey, people seem to like completely gloss over this as a concept. Subtitles are a translation too.
Yes.
You're not like, unless you are a native speaker of Japanese, you're not privy to what's actually being said. You are
Yeah.
relying on a translation regardless of the fact. Now, obviously, subtitles don't have the same restriction as dubs in that, you can fit more words on a screen than you can fit sounds in an animation cut, usually. But I don't know. It's something to consider.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, that's everything I can really say about the dub and the production overall. So, dear listeners and my dear
Eh,
friend Diana, I think it's time to finally start talking about the film Spirited Away.
Hell yeah.
So, immediately, we open on a shot of a bouquet of flowers and a note that says, basically, good luck, Chihiro. We'll miss you. And we see a little girl lying forlorn in the back of her car as her parents, her mom and dad, drive this little sedan up this road towards a town.
Oh,
And
sorry. I just I would like to make a comment on how universal this beginning is, because even if you've
Yeah.
never moved, especially not moved in such a way where you needed to change schools and leave people behind, I think this feeling of, God damn it, my parents are dragging me along to something and I don't get to talk to my friends for however long, and I hate it and I'm miserable here. Like, it's such a universal feeling.
It
And
is.
a really great way to pull you into this movie and its main character and where she's at just
Yeah.
right away.
I want to say Chihiro is characterized perfectly within
So good.
just her first couple of lines, because she is sulking in the back of this car and she goes, "The first bouquet I ever got, and it's a farewell present." And
Which,
her mom goes, "Well, that's not true, sweetie. You got that rose on your birthday, remember?" And she, in like the poutiest voice imaginable, just goes, "Yeah, one rose."
it's not a
And
bouquet.
I want to know, this is the line. This is the line that Chihiro's Japanese voice actress could not get right. Yeah,
Oh.
like she just could not get the intonation right, but it's
Oh.
it's such a good bit. Just that brief interaction with her mom of, this is a child.
It also, this entire sequence, because they they're driving and they miss the turnoff, and in missing the turnoff, the dad, makes a comment, "Oh, I can't believe I missed it."
Oh, I missed
And
the turn.
"Oh, I missed the turn," like in that confused dad voice, and
Yeah.
then he like goes speeding down this back road covered by this lush overhang,
Yeah.
and
I
the
I will
way, yeah.
I do want to note, just kind of right before that,
Mhm.
they're driving up this place, obviously to get to their new house. They're driving up this road to get to their new house. The dad points out the new elementary school that Chihiro is going to, but they end up at the end of the road,
Mhm.
and they see at the end of the road a pile of like little stone, they look like little stone houses. And the mom
Yeah.
says, "Oh, well, local people believe that spirits live here."
Yeah. It's and all of this is such a lovely concoction to characterize these parents right away, where the way that the mom talks to Chihiro is so mom-like, specifically in the way that she kind of dismisses and placates her kid.
Yeah.
And the dad similarly, throughout both the kind of missing the turnoff and then like the too fast driving through this very narrow road, and even further like when we start to like get into the spirit world, he just kind of pushes past his daughter's concerns, ignores her, and all with like a jovial expression. Both of
Yeah.
these parents are so well characterized as very normal parents
Yeah.
whose
They're
actions
just
and way of
people.
treating their kid are now put into the context of, and they're not bad people, but
No.
in these specific circumstances, they're not doing great things. Like, they look
Yeah.
really bad, but also very normal, and I think that's a really interesting way of setting this up.
Yeah, it's very much they are dealing with their child rather than like communicating with their child.
Yeah. And then, like you pointed out with the little spirit houses, it also characterizes them as separated from that aspect of culture in a way that Chihiro, once they're in the spirit world, immediately embraces it and is able to exist within it in a way
Yeah.
that they simply can't fathom. Probably because I think this is what the movie kind of hints at. They have grown too old, and thus, in separating from their child selves, they have also, to a certain extent, separated from their spiritual selves.
That's interesting. Yeah, I never thought about that angle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the yeah, the dad goes ham on the off-roading here. He just floors it through these woods. Like, "Oh, I bet this wraps back around at the top of the hill." It doesn't. He is driving through these woods, and Chihiro is noticing like funny statues in the woods as they're driving, and then suddenly there's one right in front of them and a giant gate just nestled in these woods. And they slam on the brakes, stop there, and the parents get out of the car, much to Chihiro's dismay, because she feels like the wrongness of this place. Like, something's wrong here. Can we go, please? But the parents are curious, and they're like, oh, but where does this tunnel go? Oh, this interesting tunnel that is... Sorry, I'm with Chihiro on this one. It's profoundly creepy.
It's profoundly creepy, and also notable for later. It is completely barren. Like,
yeah,
the area around the statue, like the woods coming in are very lush and overgrown, whereas the statue, it's like a bare dirt around it, and the tunnel is just kind of this red brick facade. Yeah, and it's not covered by anything.
Yeah, not even brick. The dad like knocks on it, and he knows this is fake. It was made to look old, but it's all plaster.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Yeah, it is just a facade. Mm-hmm. But out of curiosity, they start to venture into the tunnel as like a creepy wind seems to be compelling them in. Chihiro notes that the wind is sucking them in. It's going into the tunnel rather than out of it.
The dub and the sub, actually, they say this slightly differently, where the dub explicitly says, oh, the wind is like pulling us in, whereas the sub, at least in the translation that we're getting, describes it more as the wind feels like it is coming in such a way that it's going into the tunnel.
Yeah. She gets really bad vibes from this, but her parents are walking in by themselves, and because Chihiro is a child, and one of the worst things to be as a child is by yourself, follows them into what she is certain is danger.
I want to point out a really great animation moment as she's deliberating on following her dumb, stupid, idiot parents into the scary hole. She, like, bounces up and down on both of her feet as if she has to go to the bathroom really bad before running after them.
It's a very cute characterization because she does this a couple times in the movie, that motion, and it's very sweet because, as we talked about with the production, it's absolutely something the little girl that Miyazaki knew did. Like, it's almost certainly that's why she does that. They walk through the tunnel and they come into this gorgeous... It looks like a train station. There's, like, benches on the ground. It's just this open air, like, not open air, but, like, this indoor pavilion, really high ceilings, benches, beautiful, like, stained glass windows filtering in, and we presume that this is some kind of station because Chihiro picks up on a sound, and, well, they all hear it, and Chihiro goes, oh, it's a train, and... She actually gets a smile on her face because even the scary uncertainty of the situation is no match for the childlike wonder brought on by a train and the prospect of seeing a train.
I, too, love trains. The other thing that I noted while watching this, and I think it's just my associations, I don't know if this was what they were going for, but every time I've seen this, I thought that it looked a lot like a church.
It does
like the
have
stained glass
vibes.
Windows, the benches look like pews. I don't... Here's the thing. I don't want to say it's on purpose, but I also don't think it is an out-of-the-park association for me to have in terms of, again, this movie's connection to spirituality. Yeah. Yes, it is specifically
there is
Buddhism.
A reverence to it.
Yeah. And Japan is not, like, a stranger to Christianity. These things get tied together over the years, and again, I think it's specifically evocative of a train station, or even supposed to be a train station, but I don't think I'm, like, far off making that connection.
Yeah. I think I also get train station vibes from it, not just from, like, an aesthetic perspective, but from and I'm loath to use this word, but no, this word is good for talking about things like this. This is a liminal space.
Absolutely.
Like, in the actual definition of a liminal space, not that shit they post on Reddit, where it's just, oh, look at this pool that's empty. Liminal. No. Liminal means something. It means a transitory space. A space where you are not meant to exist, to remain, to be. It's not somewhere you are, it's somewhere you pass through. That is what this feels like.
I will push back on that slightly as
Okay.
a literature student.
Oh, okay. Well, I defer
Liminal
to you. You know more about words.
liminality is something that got brought up also in context of existing in between spaces. Yeah, so liminality for sure can be a little bit broader. Also, I
Yeah.
will say no, the pool thing, that's not a liminal
I
space.
know. It's not.
That's
People have taken it to
no.
mean, oh, it's creepy and weird. No, that's not what
No.
liminal means. They leave this station, question mark, out into a gorgeous green field. And we just see this wide shot of these green, lush hills and the wind kind of cascading and sending the ripple through the grass. And I want to weep almost because I can see this is what animation is capable of. And this is immediately after watching shit like Quest for Camelot and Pete's Dragon.
I mean, listen, animation is such a fluid and versatile
Yeah.
medium, and we can have both this beautiful rippling grass, evocative of the wonder of wilderness and the spiritual
Mhm.
connected to nature.
Uh-huh.
And also, you can have two horny fucking dragons
And their
with
giant
lovingly
rippling
animated
ass.
and their lovingly animated legs.
Yeah. God.
Anyway,
Anyways, the
Chihiro and her
beauty
parents.
and serenity of nature.
Chihiro and her parents
Yeah.
come out of this train station,
Hmm.
and this is where something that you talked about comes in as far as
Yes.
Miyazaki's inspirations, where the dad immediately says, "Oh, this is an old amusement park. They built a lot of these, I think he says either in the 80s or 90s, but because of the recession,
Yeah.
they all closed down."
Yeah. The recession. Like,
The recession.
this ever present hardship that I think is in a lot of Miyazaki's films. The
Hmm.
most recent I watched was The Boy and the Heron. Well, obviously, the most recent before I watched this one with you.
Yeah.
And that's also there. Granted,
Hmm.
it's like the wartime hardship, but that's there in a lot of his movies. I would almost argue in every movie.
Yeah. Yeah. And
There's,
I've definitely ruminated on this specific detail of it being an old abandoned amusement park for this specific movie. But yeah, this specifically being an amusement park, right?
mhm,
And weirdly enough, I think it goes back to that idea of liminal spaces, and this is a place that served a very specific function that it no longer has and never again will have.
yeah. I want to say, I think something else that this kind of plays into is this idea that this is not for you anymore.
Yeah. It's this interesting thing of amusement parks to me. Yes, like they have origins in like the 17 and 1800s with like specifically I think for like Western understanding the
Yeah.
invention of the Ferris wheel in the 1800s. That feels very
Yeah.
like okay, amusement parks are about to be a thing, right? So
Yeah,
this
they
is a
started as like,
relatively
I
yeah.
was going to say, they had their roots in like picnic areas, which I think is
Yeah.
interesting because one of the first things Chihiro's mom remarks as they're walking through this field is, "Oh, what a lovely place for a picnic. I wish we'd brought some food."
Yeah. And that feels like that association is so modern, right? But then this movie is so much, like you said, about going back to traditional values and, in quotes, simpler times. And there's a sense of you can make new things and impose modernity onto different parts of the environment, but it will always go back. There is always a return. There's a cycle here. And I like themes like that. I just find them interesting. And to a certain extent, I agree with it wholeheartedly about that kind of returning to, and in a good way. Like, that is something that I think this
Yeah.
movie wants to do.
Yeah. They continue to walk through this field, and there is a strong wind kind of pushing them forward that Chihiro makes note of, but the parents seem just completely unfazed by it. But in addition to this wind, there is also a very clear note of crossing a threshold here because they come to the end of the field and there is just this long snaking line of giant like boulders that the dad identifies as, oh, this is a riverbed. It must have dried up. The water probably stopped flowing when they closed the park down, I think he posits. And they cross this threshold. There is a very like clear kind of significance to them crossing this river here.
Yeah.
Because as soon as they cross, they are now in a kind of constructed plaza, like with all these streets winding down into this little town with all these colorful buildings and shops and stalls that are all entirely abandoned.
They are notably run down despite their bright colorfulness. Except as they're walking, the dad smells something on the air, something fragrant, something delicious.
Delicious.
He follows his nose through this town. And Chihiro is still like, y'all.
Yeah, she's clinging. Yeah, she's clinging to her mom, and I want to interrupt briefly to just note again the animation. There is some gorgeous parallax work here, where we get Chihiro and the mom walking alongside these shops, and we see not only the parallax of the insides of the shops as they're walking past the windows, but also their reflection on those windows. And there's like 3 layers to it. It's gorgeous. It's beautifully done.
Beautiful. They are walking through these streets, and eventually they discover that one of the shops may be open after all, according to the dad is how he phrases it. And there are piles and piles of food, steaming hot food within this stall. And
not clear on what the food is, though, is I think an important note. The food's a little weird.
The food's a little fucked up and weird, but in a way where it still looks recognizable and really delicious. Because if there's one thing that Studio Ghibli is good at doing, it's making some good-looking food. And the parents agree because they instantly grab food and start chowing down.
Yeah, it's...
No thought!
Here's the thing, like, the dad attempts to say, like, hey, is anyone here? And then he sits down and starts fixing himself a plate, and it's like a slow ramp up. It's like almost a snowball effect of, like, as soon as he sits down, it just starts going faster and faster of them, just starting taking more stuff. Chihiro is protesting this, obviously, because I'm with Chihiro here. The parents have lost me completely. I could not fucking imagine doing this in this situation. I would see all that food piled up in a place that is otherwise entirely deserted. This pristine, gorgeous feast in the middle of fucking nowhere with no one around and presumably no one watching over it.
Yep.
My immediate thought is, this is not for me. I'm going to get spirited away. I'm going to get trapped by the Fae. I gotta go.
Heather, you're gonna get title dropped.
I'm gonna get title dropped. I'm gonna get Skinnamarink in this motherfucking amusement park. And I don't want that for myself. I'm getting out of here.
This also begins a moment of characterization for Chihiro that lasts throughout the movie to a certain extent, because in some ways she kind of grows past this, or else it develops into something less explicit, I think I want to say.
Okay.
Where she says, you can't do, guys, stop. Like, we can't do this. We're going to get in trouble.
Yeah.
And that is absolutely a through line for her. Is one of her big characteristics is she follows directions.
Yeah.
And does so to a T, which, as we see here and also throughout the rest of the movie, saves both her and also the people that she loves. And it's very childlike to me in the way that she does it. Like, childlike positive. Because this is a specific scenario where, hey, Japanese folklore and mythology and their different religions all very much involve, like, specific rules that don't necessarily make sense to an outside observer, but if you don't follow them, the spirits are gonna fucking get your ass.
Yeah,
You're gonna get spirited away, but worse.
Yeah, I'm going to kind of build on and try to articulate my feelings on what you just said about Chihiro's like development into something less explicit. I think what ultimately shifts is Chihiro's response to trouble, like as a concept.
Yeah.
And how she reacts to it and what she falls back upon. Because obviously she is trying to avoid trouble by, like, you know, sticking to social conventions. Like, this isn't our food, we can't eat it, we're going to get in trouble, and that's scary. But I think as the movie goes through, I think Chihiro's attitude might shift more towards, I'm going to get through this trouble by relying on what I've, like, come to understand.
Yeah. She also has less extreme reactions.
Yeah.
Like right here, she's shouting, like, you can't do that. But she also encounters more people who follow the rules in the same way that she did. Like, they also understand them. And so she doesn't have to yell and be like, hey, we can't do this. Instead, she can just do the thing.
Yeah.
And worry about herself and the people who are allowing her to save them.
Yeah. Chihiro is so distressed by this and decides to, like, get out of there. She just kind of wanders off away from where her parents are eating, and she comes to this bridge over the water. Well, not actually over the water, over, like, a deep ravine. And she looks down and she sees a train there. Like, she sees the train run underneath the bridge, and she notes that the bridge leads to a bathhouse, and the smokestack of that bathhouse is lit, despite the fact that, you know, no one's around. But someone is around, because as soon as she looks up from the train, she turns and she is face to face with a young boy with a Prince Valiant haircut who looks absolutely shocked to see her. And before she can ask who he is, he very angrily, like, kind of approaches her and says, what are you doing here? You need to leave immediately. Yeah. And before she can ask why, he turns around and he sees the lights coming on as the sun is going down. And he says, it'll be dark soon. They're already turning on the lamps. You need to get back across the river now. I will hold them off. And she starts running, and he turns and he blows, like, on his hand, and, like, a shower of scales flies out from it towards something that we can't see on the other side of the bridge.
Yeah. Yeah, because the action is not with this. The action is instead still with Chihiro as she runs back to her parents and is like, guys, we gotta go. I met this guy. He told me we had to fucking leave.
And as she's running through the town, I want to note, she is, like, just behind the lights that are coming on, because they're coming on one after another down the street, and she is just barely keeping pace with them. And as these lights come on, the shops come to life, where we see kind of smoke form into humanoid shapes that begin, you know, participating in, like, exchange and kind of walking through these streets. This place becomes filled as the lights come on, as night falls, and Chihiro is running, chasing the light and running from the shadow here.
And the shadows are not over yet, Heather, because she gets to her parents and she tells them, we gotta leave. Dad, we need to leave. Her father turns around. He is her father no longer. Her parents are now pigs.
They are huge, disgusting pigs of just, like, chowing down on this food, squealing and, like, rolling out. It's very upsetting. I remember how upset this scene made me as a child.
Chihiro, I think rightfully at this point, runs screaming back towards from whence from whence they came when walking up to the shop. And
in a kind of very childlike and very understandable denial, continues to call for her mom and dad, because that couldn't have been them. Those were
No.
pigs. Those weren't her parents. They were just pigs dressed up to look like her parents. That's gotta be it. And as she is in a panic, fleeing down the stairs that led up to this town, she suddenly splashes and is waist deep into the river, which has flooded back and is now 50 times wider.
Yeah.
She looks across the horizon and sees, lit up and surrounded by other buildings, the gate that she came through, and riverboats, and people moving around it.
And it's so far away now.
It's so far away.
It looks like it is across, like, a lake.
Like an ocean, almost. It is just straddling the horizon.
Yeah. And as she stands there looking over it, the riverboat comes closer and at last reaches the shore.
Yeah.
And on the boat, the doors, like, open up and little pieces of paper, at first it seems, kind of start coming out the doors.
Yeah, floating out.
Around the height of maybe, like, a face, because they are indeed covering the faces of different kinds of spirits who manifest as they are walking off the boat and onto the riverbank.
Yeah, you can see the shadows of these spirits, like, being cast, like, on the wall of the riverboat, even as their bodies are invisible and materializing. It's very cool. This specific design of spirit, Miyazaki says, is based on, like, a shrine ritual, where they depict, like, an old man's face with, like, a drawing on a piece of paper that covers the face, I think.
Okay.
But as this is all happening, Chihiro is so overwhelmed, she, like, curls into a ball and starts, like yelling, "I'm dreaming, wake up, disappear, like, I want to go away from this place." And as she's doing that, her body literally is starting to become, like, ethereal.
Yeah.
Which rightfully terrifies her.
There's the shit out of her, because,
She tries, like, covering her eyes and realizes she can see through her hands now.
Terrifying. Yeah.
She runs off to hide, but is grabbed then by the boy who was angry, but now is nice.
Yeah. Listens to her suddenly. He encourages her to eat some food that is of the world, saying that it will make her...
It will keep her
visible.
It will keep her from disappearing. That is what he says. He hands her, like, this little berry. And she's so scared to eat it, and he reassures her, "It won't turn you into a pig, I promise."
Yeah, haunting thing. Also interesting that I don't think we ever get any explanation as to why she started to disappear, which is something that I like. I like that this movie doesn't feel the need to always explain itself. You just understand that either it's the rules of the world, presumably that you kind of speculate she is human and this is the spirit world, and therefore she is the spirit now. Or even when she said she wanted to disappear, there was, like, similar to how her parents ate like pigs and therefore became pigs, she wanted to disappear from this place and therefore began to, because that's some of how this world works. There's a little bit of that in there.
Yeah. So I actually have something interesting to say about this. This is regarding the title of the movie in its original Japanese.
Okay.
Which is Sen to Chihiro no Kamigakushi, which translates to Sen and Chihiro are spirited away. But spirited away, or Kamigakushi, is translated as spirited away, but the literal meaning of it is hidden by the gods.
Interesting.
And it refers to this idea of vanishing into the spirit world. And there's a kind of companion idea of, like, coming back from it change. So I think, like, that disappearing thing kind of ties into that, like, that specific word, because that's a specific, like, concept in Japanese, like, folklore. I don't know. It's interesting. I think the
Yeah.
Western equivalent would be like fairy tales where you become like taken by the fae or lost in the woods.
Yeah.
It's a kind of a universal concept, I think, in myth of
Yeah.
crossing this border and not being compatible with like the world that you're in now.
And now we get to talk a little bit about translation again and how direct translation and localization are sometimes a little bit incompatible. Because if this movie had been called Hidden by the Gods, no one would know what the fuck you're talking about. Or they would get the
Yes.
wrong idea by it.
Yeah.
Whereas Spirited Away is, like, I'm pretty sure the origins of the idea of being spirited away is literally taken by the Fae. Like, I'm pretty sure 95% that is where that phrase is coming from. So, and it also, I think, Hidden by the Gods in English sounds a little bit sinister.
Yeah.
Whereas Spirited Away feels more like whimsical and adventurous, which is the tone that the movie is ultimately going for. Chihiro goes on an adventure and has a good time. Like, it's not the best time, but it's a positive experience overall.
Yeah.
So, good title change, actually.
Yeah. Yeah, to take a quote directly from, like, this is from Wikipedia. It comes from a February 2009 article, I think, from Film Criticism. The article being Spirited Away, film of the fantastic and evolving Japanese folk symbols.
Mm-hmm.
The explanation of kamikakushi, which means hidden by the gods. Kamikakushi is a verdict of social death in this world, and coming back to this world from kamikakushi meant social resurrection. Yeah, it is often translated as spirited away.
Mm-hmm.
It refers to the mysterious disappearance or death of a person after they have specifically angered spirits.
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay.
yeah, it is very similar to the concept of being taken by the fae.
Yeah. And also, Chihiro and her parents certainly have angered the spirits.
Yes.
As we see when, after eating the berry, this strange boy, I don't remember when we get his name. We're gonna start calling him Haku because calling him the boy repeatedly is gonna start to wear on everybody.
He will
His name is
introduce
Haku.
himself eventually as Haku.
And thus we will call him Haku from here on out.
Yes.
Haku asked Chihiro to get up. Initially, she actually can't.
Yeah. He covers her briefly for a moment because there is a bird kind of circling above. A bird with a hag's face, like an old lady with like a big old witch nose and gray hair done up in a bun, flying around as like with the lower body of like a raven.
Yeah. She's a fucked up little bird and I love her.
And Haku says, they're looking for you. They know you're here. We need to go. And he tells her to get up and run, and she says, my legs won't move. What do I do?
Help.
Yeah. And he casts a spell on her legs. He places his hand over her legs, and he says, by the wind and the water within, unbind her. And he brings her up to her feet, and then they take off inhumanly fast.
Yes.
Well, she's kind of been untethered from, like, physical space here, which I think is very cool. She's, like, moving like a spirit would.
Yeah.
And he is pulling her through all these locations, casting spells so that, like, doors fling themselves open ahead of them. And something to note, basically every place he is dragging her through is some kind of slaughterhouse.
Yep.
Yeah, and they pass a room full of pigs.
Yeah, I wonder what that's about, Heather. I wonder if that's going to come up later in the movie.
Yeah, whatever could this be foreshadowing?
Foreshadowing is a literary device.
Foreshadowing is a literary device. They get back to the bathhouse bridge, and Haku decides to cast another spell on her.
He casts another spell on her and says, okay, we're going to cross this bridge, but you cannot speak to anybody or else the spell will be broken.
You cannot breathe. If you take a breath, my spell will be broken.
So she as all children would, takes a big breath and also plugs up her nose with her fingers because yeah,
Uh-huh.
that's what you would do. And they start walking across the bridge.
Yeah.
Haku in
Wait. By the
oh,
way, something important that happens on the bridge. Oh, hey, who's
oh,
that? As
oh hey,
they're
what's
as they're
that?
crossing, as they're crossing the bridge, Chihiro spots like a strange spirit who looks just like kind of like a big smoke column with just like a mask with a very neutral, maybe slightly bemused expression on it. And this thing actually follows her with its gaze. It doesn't
Mhm.
react to her in any way, but it seemingly can see through Haku's spell.
Yeah, and we don't know who that is. Who is
Yeah.
that? Hey, who is that?
Hey, who is that?
Haku encounters.
Yeah. Everyone
As
is
they were
greeting
going.
him, by the way. Everyone he's
Yes.
passing is greeting him. One person, like, bows and says, "Welcome back, Master Haku."
hmm And specifically, they come across this little frogman who's going to appear repeatedly in this movie and
Yeah,
eventually become an issue.
this little tiny green frog in a lovely blue, like, coat.
Yeah. And then I am blanking once again on the specifics
Yeah,
of
he
this.
basically leaps up excitedly, be like, "Yo, Haku, where you been, man?" And as he leaps up like directly to like eye level, and this startles Chihiro, and for like half a second she gasps and tries to cover up her mouth, but the frog, like in midair, goes, "What? A human?" And
What a human!
Haku like immediately traps him in a bubble and just fucking books it across the rest of the bridge, dragging Chihiro along.
This this frog gets the short end of the stick for a lot of this movie.
Yeah, he is just like, we cut back to him and he's just like hovering in a paralytic state as Haku drags Chihiro across the bridge and down towards like a little garden area next to a tiny door in the wall of the bathhouse.
Hey, that's crazy. What's that door doing there? I wonder
I
what
don't
that's a reference to,
I
Heather.
wonder I wonder what's on the other side of it. What This
Whoa.
could be inspiration for a story.
Yeah. When Haku brings Chihiro down into the little garden, he now gives her some instructions because she's been seen, like she's been spotted. They're already looking for her, but now they know we're looking for a
Yeah.
human.
We hear the clamor in like the bathhouse as they are crouching under this windows of everyone being like, "There's a human intruder, find her."
Yep. Haku tells Chihiro what you're going to do
Yeah.
because if they catch you, like that's not a good thing.
Yeah, it's over if they catch you.
It's so over. I don't think he explicitly says what's gonna happen, but
He does not hide the fact that it is going to be bad. He tells
like
her she has to
dangerous.
be very brave.
Yeah, which is God, like you said this both times we watched the movie. God, this kid is brave, and we love a brave child protagonist in this
We
house.
love when a child is so brave with it.
Haku explains to her she needs to now go down to the boiler room.
Uh-huh.
There's a guy down there. His name's Kamaji. You need to go down there and ask him for a job. It does not matter how many times he says no, you have to keep asking for a job until he gives one to you.
Yeah, he is
And
going to tell you no. He is going
he's
to tell
going
you
to
to
tell
fuck
you no.
off.
Yeah. But you can't. You can't
You
let that
have
happen.
to-
You have yeah.
Yeah, you have
Never-
to insist upon it.
And basically implies you can't ever accept it. Like you have to continuously insist upon getting a job.
If you have a job, Yubaba can't touch you. If you don't, and I just checked my notes, he does say this. He does tell her what will happen. He says, if you don't, Yubaba will turn you into an animal.
Yeah. We learn later kind of the importance of insisting that you have a job and not accepting no for an answer in this specific circumstance.
Actually, here is where we do get Haku introducing himself.
Oh, okay.
He says that his name is Haku, and he calls Chihiro by her name. And when she asks, "How do you know my name?" he says, "Oh, I know you from long ago. I've known you for most of your life, actually." He does not elaborate on what he means by this, but he kind of just compels her to go enact the plan, do what he told her, as he slips away back to like the chaos of the bathhouse, and he's saying like, "Yes, I'm also looking for the human, actually. Let's go this way."
Yeah. So
Yeah.
she runs off She
Hmm.
runs through the tiny door and she finds herself in like a back area of the bathhouse.
Yeah, like
And
behind the building.
yeah. And in being back here, she finds herself at the top of this steep set of stairs that are hugging the wall of the bathhouse, and they don't look entirely stable.
No, they do a dolly zoom on these stairs just to show how
These
unstable they are.
these are some scary fucking stairs. I'd be scared too. And she more or less gasses herself up to go down the scary stairs and
Yeah,
takes the first couple of steps. And
like
oh no, one of the stairs breaks
yeah.
under her
Oh
feet.
no.
Ah!
Yeah, agonizingly slow. She's like her entire body's like laying down against these stairs. Her hands are wrapped around like the beam. And she's like moving her foot down ever so slowly. And yeah, one of the stairs breaks.
And she, great child scream in both the sub and the dub as she races down the rest of the stairs and then
Yeah.
smacks her face directly into like the pillar at the bottom of it.
Yeah, just smack right into a concrete wall. If you've ever like run down a hill as a child, you know exactly what this feels like. Where
Yeah.
you just have to keep speeding up because you can't fucking stop.
Of note, Chihiro goes down the first couple of stairs in the same way that I still handle ladders to this day because I am afraid of heights.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now that she has conquered the stairs, and let's put a pin in this stairs scene because she has to do something similar later and it
Uh-huh.
plays out differently, and I love it.
Yeah. I want to before we move on from this scene, I just want to take a note of like the shot they do once she reaches the bottom of the stairs. It's like a zoom out and then a zoom in
Hmm.
of this section of the bathhouse and all of the like steam pipes just running through and in and out of this like concrete foundation and just
Yeah.
the steam that's billowing out of like their joints. It it's so cool looking. The
It's
environments
so
that are just like painted in here and animated are just mwah.
once again we talk about something that is lovingly animated, and we were kind of being jokingly negative about it the last couple of times. This is lovingly animated positive for sure.
Yeah, lovingly animated, such to the point where when she goes inside this door at the bottom of the stairs and heads through these hallways towards the boiler room, she's passing through these halls with these pipes, and the gauges on them are animated. Even like the small dials move, and that's so cool. It's just this one little detail that if it wasn't there, you wouldn't miss it. But because it is there, it makes the scene feel that much more alive. And
And
that
they're
is what
even
I
like
love about animation.
they're even like steamed up.
Yeah,
It's so good.
it's
It is
so good.
beautiful to
It's
look
so
at.
good.
She gets to the boiler room,
Uh-huh.
and we are greeted with a panorama of things that are strange but delightful.
Oh, so
Because
delightful. I love the boiler room.
Heather, I'm gonna get his name wrong again. Hit me one more time with it.
We meet Kamaji, and
Hamaji is
who
here.
introduces himself as slave to the boiler beneath the bathhouse.
Iconic.
He is this multi-limbed dude with this big, bushy, like Dr. Eggman mustache and these round little Dr. Eggman glasses. He looks kind of like if Dr. Eggman was skinny and had 6 arms. He is like this
He
spider dude. He is like otherwise looks pretty human except for like the multiple limbs that kind of stretch and move about this boiler room. 2 of them are like wheeling and grinding herbs. Others are like, stoking the flames and all that. And there's this room is covered wall to wall in what look like wooden drawers. Something that happens that is going to
Mhm.
be built upon later. A lot of this is built upon. Like
Yeah.
a lot of little moments. Like these little tokens drop down from the ceiling on blue ribbons. Kamaji like reads them and like gets like in a huff about that there's 4 at the same time, and one of his hands like extendo arms
Yeah, this
towards
rules.
like the drawers without like really even needing to look, and he just pulls out a bunch of herbs and brings them over to his grinder.
Hmm. Also, props to this movie. I said it before and I'll say it again. This moment isn't creepy. Like, it could be so easy to have a
No,
humanoid
it's
arm
not.
stretching too long be creepy. It's not like
Yeah,
that. And I think part of it is because he speaks to her when he's doing it, where he's like, move, get out of the way.
yeah,
And it's like such a human moment that when he
yeah,
does it, it feels like, yeah, this is natural for
yeah.
him. Like, this is
They
what he does.
they also don't really add any creepy sound effects you'd associate
No,
with like a limb stretching. It's almost just like fabric.
yeah.
Like, yeah.
This is his body and it's how it works. Hmm.
And in this little space, which is like the little space that is in Japanese homes, this little recessed bit of floor that you're meant to take your shoes off in before you properly enter a building, is
Hmm.
full of tiny little guys who are walking
Little
from little
guys.
holes drilled in the wall, carrying coal and tossing them into the boiler, which is this immense iron machine that is just making this constant rumbling and turning of gears as like this slot opens and fills the room with like this flaming orange glow before it shuts again, as it kind of just opens and shuts in a cycle as these tiny little like sprites, which Kamaji points out that these are bits of soot that he has animated with magic, um,
Yes.
as they carry coal to the boiler and just toss him in one by one.
Yeah.
This room is so much fun. It's so
It's
much
so
fun.
much fun. It is also kind of as we talked about earlier with the tunnel and then the river, because this movie loves its transition points. This is a threshold as well, and once Chihiro steps over it,
Yes.
she's like officially here, right?
Yeah, she's officially
And
here.
in being officially here, she demands a job from Kamaji here. And as warned by Haku, he rejects her just like over and over again.
Yeah,
I have
tells her,
enough workers.
I
Yeah.
have enough workers. Like, I don't need your help. You just get in the way. And as he is saying this is punctuated by her, like, basically literally getting in the way as, like, the soot sprites clamor around her feet and bump into each other.
It's so charming.
And
I love these guys.
one of them drops its piece of coal onto itself, and, like, you can see its arms kind of flailing underneath it like a bug.
And in seeing this, Chihiro goes to like pick up the coal off of it, and we discover this coal is way heavier than it appears to be
This
because she
coal
fucking
is magic
struggles.
heavy. Yeah, this coal is
Yeah.
magic heavy.
But she picks it up, the dust sprite like pops up out of the ground again,
Skitters
and
back into its hole to get another piece of coal.
she asks, what do I do with this? And Kamaji tells her, finish the work that you've started.
Yeah, finish
And
what
so
you start, child.
yes. And she pays attention to how the sprites are kind of inching across the floor, like sidestepping, and she like mimics their movement. She also sidesteps and goes up to the little, like, it looks like the little, like, Pride Rock from The Lion
Yeah.
King. She goes up onto it, and the sprites all get out of her way, because it's a big moment. It's a big moment in this
big
movie.
moment.
And she times like the opening and closing of the boiler, throws her chunk of coal in, and scrambles back triumphant.
Yeah.
The sprites see this happen, and they all instantly drop their pieces of coal onto themselves. It's such a good moment.
Like, oh no, the coal's so heavy. You have to help
it's
us.
too heavy for us.
Yeah, and Kamaji is immediately pissed off at this. Kind of mostly at the sprites, but also at Chihiro, where he says you can't take someone else's job. Like,
He also,
very much
and this is-
establishing like
Yeah.
rules to like rules of engagement to this space that this child
Yeah.
is clearly not privy to.
he establishes both that and also a detail which is less important in the long run, but a little bit of fun world building where he says, if they stop working, you turn back into dust. Like, do you
Yeah.
want to do that, idiots?
Yeah,
Carry
the
your
s-
rocks.
Yeah, the spell is contingent on them continuing to work, but the soot has unionized now, and they like Chihiro. They, like, clamor around her and form, like, a little pile around her feet. Not, like, trying to get her to take her work, but now, like, being like, no, don't send her away. We like her.
We like her. She's one of us.
Yeah.
This is
I want to.
derailed though,
Yeah.
because that
Oh,
bit, it's Lynn.
this
It's
is
Lynn and
Lynn.
she's here.
Yeah.
She is she is a worker at the bathhouse. And interesting, her design is slightly different from all the women. She is like
Yeah.
thinner and taller than a lot of them,
She
and a
is.
little bit more human looking, I
Yeah.
would
I was
say.
going to say she is much more human shaped than
Yeah,
everyone else, but explicitly, this is
not
like
a human.
yeah, explicitly not a human. They never
Yeah.
refer to her as a human. Whenever they refer to a human, even when speaking to her, it is always as this is a separate thing.
Yeah. She comes in to deliver them their meal. I forget if I think it's like breakfast break
It's like
specific. It doesn't matter.
rice. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
rice.
It's rice for Kamaji, and then the Soot get like these little star-shaped candy looking things.
Yeah, they
It's
get
delightful.
sprinkles.
They get sprinkles.
They get sprinkles.
And
It's a very cute moment, I think, of like immediately you pick up on this vibe of like, oh, these are coworkers. Because she
yeah.
immediately like comes in and she's like, all right, now where's the bowl from yesterday? I told you like to not leave it here. And he sheepishly hands over a dirty dish. And she like kind of like sticks her nose out at him.
Yeah. And she notices Chihiro quickly as she is feeding the sprites and says, "Holy shit, what are you doing
Yeah.
here? Yeah, people are looking for you. What the fuck are you doing here?" And Kamaji says, "That's my granddaughter."
Yeah, in like the warmest, most matter-of-fact tone, completely different from like what the like his attitude towards Chihiro before, where he was kind of like very very gruff and dismissive. But
Hmm.
now he's just like, she's my granddaughter and she'd like a job. Can you take her to
And she
Yumaba and make her give her a job?
and she's a hard worker. She's
Yeah,
tough.
she's a hard
Like,
worker. I
yeah,
think she'll do fine.
yeah. And Lynn is reluctant at first, and then we get kind of like the moment that, if you didn't get it before, kind of clues you in. Oh, Lynn isn't like human. She's a person, but she's not human, because she's reluctant to take Chihiro, and Kamaji's like, what if I sweeten the deal with this roasted newt?
Yeah, this roasted newt. That's just straight up a newt that is like completely blackened.
Yeah, a newt, like a lizard. I I'm not presuming people are stupid, but just like
Yeah.
it's not necessarily an animal that everybody knows. It's a
It,
lizard.
yeah, it looks straight up like a lizard, just that's
Yeah.
been blackened.
And she's like, fine, and she accepts her bribe. And
Snatches it from her.
Chihiro, yep, Chihiro is, gets ready to go with her. She goes to leave, and Lynn is like, thank him, like he just did you a
Yeah.
favor. And Chihiro, bows and says thank you so much, and starts to go. Lynn again is like, leave your fucking shoes, because Chihiro takes
And your
them off.
socks.
But she says, leave your shoes and your socks. And Chihiro puts them down on the like dip beneath the little
Yeah.
step leading up.
As
and
you are supposed to.
as you're supposed to do. And the sprites immediately claim her shoes. Those are theirs
Yeah.
now.
It's great. It's a
They love
great
her
little
shoes.
moment. And Chihiro is taken through a little door in the wall of the boiler room. And again, this is your talk about how the boiler room itself is a threshold, not just in a physical way, but also in a like metaphorical way, because now she is crossing from an outsider to the bathhouse as into a prospective employee.
Yes. And they go through this very cool like backroom sequence where you see the inner workings of the bathhouse.
The verticality of it is wonderful. You see the shots like up through this staircase and these elevators and pulleys that are going up and down, and it's all just so kinetic and vertical, and it's awesome.
It reminds me of bad movie, but I like this aspect of it. The 2004, I think, Phantom of the Opera adaptation, where
Sorry.
no, you should do that. You heard Phantom of the Opera. But in that movie, you see a lot of the back rooms of the opera. Because when you see it staged, it is extremely meta in its staging, where, yes, you are watching a play, but a lot of times you are also explicitly watching a play that they are putting on within the play. And so it's very of the front house of the opera. Whereas in the movie, they kind of take advantage of the fact that they now have space, for better or for worse, to show you the back of the opera.
Yeah.
And it's all these tiny, tight corridors in contrast to the grand openness of the opera.
Yeah.
It's very similar here because we spend a lot of time in the bathhouse and also in the opulent, like, upper management rooms. And so I think it's interesting and really cool that your introduction to the bathhouse is instead these tight passageways showing you, like, how it's run instead.
You get to see the artifice before the facade.
Yes.
It's great. It's really cool. Because we still haven't seen the inside of the bathhouse.
We still aren't there yet. But at last we are getting there because Lin and Chihiro go into this little like service elevator.
Yeah.
And it takes them up. And Lin specifically tells Chihiro, hey, be careful. If like you lean against that back wall, you're gonna just fall through.
Yeah.
Which great moment and great moment of contrast because when the elevator opens up, we are now in the front part of the bathhouse.
Yes.
And also, before we get to the next part that's a good like contrast to this, we meet a very special guy. Someone very special is waiting for us outside the elevator.
We caught glimpses of him before this point, but now he is properly introduced where the doors open and we see, filling up the entire frame of the elevator, the Radish Spirit.
The Radish Spirit!
Yeah, this just big white kind of shape of a thing, of a spirit. It was just
this man
kind of,
who is also a root.
Yeah, this kind of portly guy who's got like big, like all of his extremities, like his limbs, his legs, look like just like a daikon. And he's got like a big, exaggerated kind of walrus mustache, also made of daikons.
Yeah, and they're wiggling.
Yeah, all he is wearing is just a little like loincloth and a big like soup bowl as a head. As a hat.
As a head.
He doesn't say anything. He just kind of like vaguely points up, and Lin informs him, "This elevator doesn't go any higher, sir. Sorry, you have to find another one." And she kind of quickly ushers Chihiro out of the elevator. She is constantly positioning herself, like positioning Chihiro, but she's constantly positioning herself between Chihiro and the rest of the bathhouse.
Yeah.
She's very clearly like keeping Chihiro hidden. The Radish Spirit definitely sees her and just kind of slowly starts to follow them. You hear like the big like heavy squeaks of his steps on the floorboards.
I love this guy so much.
He's so great.
And we get to start to see the bathhouse now. All of these divided rooms where spirits are being tended to in these big, fragrant tubs. They get to the next elevator. The Radish Spirit follows them inside this thing.
Yeah. Well, follows Chihiro, because what Lin does is she pushes Chihiro into the elevator and the Radish Spirit just waltzes in because someone has kind of cornered her, and this is a bathhouse worker. The male bathhouse workers are kind of these frog-looking guys. Yeah. They're like a halfway between a man and a frog. They're these very like stout, like frog-shaped faces, big old eyes,
webbed hands. Yeah.
Yeah, and he remarks. Oh wait, go ahead.
Sorry, my theory about the one like actual frog guy is that he's discriminated against for looking like an actual frog.
Oh.
They don't like him for that.
Oh no. Well, Lin kind of stops him or he stops Lin and he's like, "Oh, Lin, how's it going? Hey, you smell funny. You smell like a human, actually."
Yeah.
What's up with
stinky.
that?
You're a little stinky, Lin.
And hey, we're looking for a human. Did you find the human? What's up with that, Lin? And Lin says, "Oh, you're probably smelling this," and whips out the roasted newt, which is quickly deduced as this is a delicacy among the bathhouse workers because his mouth waters and he leaps at it. And she's like, this is all for me.
Nothing comes of that because she just swallows it whole.
Yeah, she eats it anyways. Once
And
the elevator doors start to close, because she says, "Oh, pretending to talk to the radish spirit, but definitely talking to Chihiro, you have to pull the lever on the side to go up."
yep. And so Chihiro squeezes herself around the radish guy because he's large and pulls this lever. And we get like a brief kind of comedic scene of her hanging out with this guy who is taking up so much
All of
space.
the
But
elevator.
he's
All of
being
it.
polite about it.
Yeah,
Like,
he's not
he's
like
just a big
crowding
guy.
her. He's just large. And she like looks at him briefly. He looks down and makes eye contact with her and she kind of looks away. They stop on the floor that presumably the radish spirit was going to get off on because this is like where baths are. But he doesn't. He instead pulls the lever again and just starts going up with Chihiro.
Yeah. They're hanging out
They
now and he's
yeah,
cool.
they open up on like the penthouse floor, the executive floor, and
Already is
the
so
radish,
opulent.
yeah, so opulent. There's like gilding all over like the columns and the doors and the molding. And the radish spirit kind of leans out of the elevator, looks left, looks right, and then kind of waves Chihiro out of the elevator. She gives him a little bow as he waves goodbye, and the elevator's doors close, and she is alone.
I love the radish spirit. I do want to just interject here. Just again with the contrast between like the back house
Yeah,
of the bathhouse and the front of it. These elevators are so different. Like this one's larger, it has paneling.
yeah.
It like even the like the device that they use, like the little handle that you pull to bring you up is
Yeah,
so much
it's a
fancier.
Yeah, it's a big brass lever.
Yeah. They're really setting up like this difference
Yeah.
between the workers and the patrons of the bathhouse.
Yeah, the
And
thresholds are all really distinct because even here, this floor is so dark. The bathhouse is like
dark.
awash in this golden glow in the places where all the customers are, but here when we get the executive suite, it's very dark.
And it's also, despite being dark and huge and very empty, it is so crowded. Whereas in
Yeah,
comparison to the bathhouse, which is full of people, but it has like this huge vaulted ceiling, like it feels very
yeah,
open. And
yeah,
then, but then, like she's on this floor, and all of these doors start opening up before her,
yeah.
and yet
She
it is
she
so close and
yeah.
tight.
She walks up to one of the doors and there's a knocker on it that's like an old woman's face that when Chihiro goes to open the door, it animates and yells at her for being a rude child who would enter without knocking. But that doesn't matter because again, all the doors swing open and it is like one after another of progressively more opulent doors of like
Yeah,
brighter colors and more gold embellishments that all open at once. And we cut to like a hand in the darkness covered in like jeweled rings and pointed
wrinkled hand.
nails, like
Yeah,
beckon and say, enter. And Chihiro's like limbs snap up like into like her wrists are being restrained above her and her
hmm
body goes rigid and she is dragged like all on her heels like
by like her
through
shirt.
yeah
Yeah,
by her shirt like such that her heels are like skidding on the ground through these halls where she's like stops quickly rounds sharp corners all the way through all these back hallways until she is in the office of Yubaba the witch.
and she also, once again, because this has happened a couple times in the
Yeah.
movie, when she like is pulled to a halt, she like stumbles and like does a
Yeah. Oh,
somersault onto the ground.
she doesn't just stumble, she like completely face plants.
Yeah.
She is
She
very clumsy.
she is very
Though,
clumsy right
though
now.
this one's not her fault, really.
No. This is Yubaba's fault because that
Yeah.
is who has dragged her into this office.
Yeah, and we immediately get the vibe on Yubaba when we see her weird
Legend.
dogs. And by weird dogs, I mean detached green heads that kind of bounce and roll around on her floor, like rubbing up against Chihiro like curious like chihuahuas. And they
Yeah.
make this very funny like oi
Oh, oi,
noise.
oi. Also of note, this is not different in the sub versus the dub. They just kept these same noises, which I
Yeah,
love.
because they're great noises.
They're great noises. Why would you change them? Yubaba is the head of this bathhouse. She's like the mistress.
Emphasis on head, because that
Emphasis-
thing is huge.
This is one of Miyazaki's large-headed old women. He loves these.
He
Similarly,
loves them.
He loves them. Similar to how he loves bad driving in his movies, because that was the dad.
Yeah.
She is like well-kept woman. Like she has like a very blue dress on. Her hair is pinned up in a bun. It's very neat. She's
heavy
covered in
eyeshadow, mascara.
Yeah. Legend. Yubaba is a legend. We love her.
Cunt. Like
cunt.
capital C cunt.
Capital C cunt. And she is like sitting at her desk. And Chihiro, almost without preamble, is just like, I want a job. I want you to give me a job.
Yeah. Yubaba is not hearing
pissed.
that shit. No, she doesn't even get pissed yet. She's not hearing that shit. As soon as Chihiro says, I'd like a job, please, Yubaba just does like a zipping motion with her fingers, and Chihiro's mouth is like forced closed. And it is like, and you can see her like straining against it. And Yubaba goes, yeah, let's not hear any of that. One, why would I hire you? Two, like, I don't want humans around. Like, for example, your parents. Look at them. If they want to eat like pigs, they might as well be pigs. Kind of subtly implying, yeah, I did that. I'm the one who turned your parents into pigs. Would you like to be a piglet along with them? I think you'd make a good piglet. But you know what? You did such a good job. You were so brave for coming up here. Who helped you? Who told you to do this? Why don't you tell me so we can thank them?
Yeah. She unzips Chihiro's mouth. And because Chihiro follows directions and is a fucking legend, just immediately is like so brave. She's just like, give me a job, I want a job. And that's when Yubaba gets pissed the fuck off.
Yubaba yells and says, don't say that. Like, but Chihiro just keeps saying, I would like a job, please. She's like yelling while like holding her shirt balled up in her hands. She's so scared, but she is not relenting. Yubaba flies
launches
at her.
herself. Yeah. It
like
rules.
Almost spitting fire out of her mouth. She's so pissed off. She flies and just is like right up against its face. She's like, why the fuck would I give you a job? Who would hire you? You are a worthless worker. How dare you even ask me that? And as she is saying this, we hear crying from a room attached to Yubaba's office, kind of in the corner. And we see a big baby. A big old baby.
A big old baby. And Yubaba instantly is like, oh no, Sweetums. Sweetums, no. Yeah. Sweetums, let's go back inside. Please don't cry, Sweetums. Unfortunately,
I was going to say, something I want to point out here, that now that this has happened a couple times, it happened with Kamaji, it happened with Haku, it happened with Yubaba. There's like a specific term for this. I believe it is code switching. Like, a lot of characters in the movie do this, where they kind of are able to quickly turn off, like, a personality and immediately embody, like, another one. Like, it's facades. It's just like the fake gate. It's a facade. It's full of... This whole movie is full of thresholds and facades.
Hey, Heather, I wonder if this movie is trying to say something. Yeah, and you're right, it is code switching. That's the correct term. Yeah, because she immediately goes to a mothering figure. And what's great about Baby is that Baby doesn't have this. It, like, smashes the fucking door and gets splinters in Yubaba's very nice hairstyle.
Yeah, Yubaba is getting, like, punched by this baby. Chihiro tries again to ask for a job, and Yubaba immediately goes, yes, fine, whatever, just shut up. Shut up so I can put my baby down.
Yeah.
And we learn the reason Yubaba had that moment of just outrage and trying to convince Sen to relent on the job thing is she is bound by spirit rules to give anybody who asks for a job employment.
Yep. So that's kind of why Haku was insistent on it earlier.
Yeah. So she can't touch you if you have a job.
Yep. And she has to give you one if you ask.
Yes, she has to give you one. She will try to trick you and weasel out of her spirit oath but
Yep.
she has to. If you insist, if you push through it, you will be safe. But Yubaba's got tricks. She
Yubaba's got
says,
tricks. Yeah.
all right, Chihiro, I'll give you a job. Here's the contract. You gotta sign your name."
You gotta sign your name away.
Yeah.
And Chihiro, because she is a child, like, does this on the floor with her tongue sticking out of her mouth. She's very concentrated on writing down her name.
You-
And after she signs it, Yubaba uses magic to, like, pluck up the paper. And then also, when she sees Chihiro's name, says, "Oh, Chihiro, that's such a pretty name." And then she lifts some of the characters off with magic, like they float in the air and are swept away, like under, like they fall in her hand, I
She
think.
grabs
And
them into her fist and goes, "And
Yeah.
now it belongs to me. From now on, your name is Sen," which is the
yes.
only kanji left behind on the paper.
hmm
Hey, everybody. We're recording this after the episode is done because we had a lot more to say about this movie than we thought we would. So we're going to be cutting this into 2 parts, and we're stopping part 1 here on the threshold of Chihiro becoming Sen and becoming a full-fledged member of this bathhouse's staff. And we're gonna spot you next week on Tuesday for the conclusion to Spirited Away. I know we haven't spotted a dragon yet, and we're going into the most mysterious and adventurous part of this movie, but stay tuned.
And we'll spot you later.
We'll spot you later. Have a good one.
Bye.